Well, you have a whole book about advice for dads when it comes to weddings. Playbook for dads or Unveiled, Planning Unveiled. Love the pun. um, why did you think that was important for families and like dads especially to have for wedding planning?
Well, so often, at least in Western culture, the emphasis is very much on the bride and her mom, right? Oftentimes, dads are left out of the process. Dads are the checkbook. Here, just pay this. And part of that is socialization. So young boys and young men aren't indoctrinated into the wedding fantasy in the way that young girls and women are, and so that's part of it. But also, oftentimes, the books that I'd seen about dads in the past or men associated with wedding planning were just humorous, just almost stupid humorous. Hey, make sure you got clean underwear. That kind of just, I'm like, an idiot for heaven's sake. So explaining to dads, this is how this process works. And these are the things you need to be aware of. This is a way for you to be part of the conversation. The wedding conversation, it just kind of gets going and dad's just kind of sitting there. A perfect example was from the movie A Father of the Bride with Steve Martin. There's a scene where they go to look at wedding cakes and he's just baffled by the cost of it all. And, he doesn't get it. Well, there's no reason a dad can't get it. Here, go help dad understand what's going on. And if he wants to be part of the conversation, great. If not, at least he knows what's going on with the conversation, and can feel like he can participate in the process. So that's where it came from. Seeing dads kind of being left out of things. Weddings are not just about the couple. Weddings are about family. And if you want dad to feel like he's a part of the process, he should probably know what's going on. So,
Yeah, I've always told my dad that he has to be involved, mainly because he has better taste than my mother. So
well,
she knows, she knows. But yeah, so it's I think a changing thing with recent generations, but I'm glad that you have a serious outlook. Both Kiana and I had faces of disgust when you were like, "Yeah, wear clean underwear." We were both like, "What?" Yeah, so it's interesting. But yeah, we liked doing research for that book too. We recently did the statistic updates. So that was kind of fun to look at things like the knot or like Pinterest boards to see what trends were. So having those be included is fun recent update. Yeah. Mhm.
When you've done the research for your marriage and family engagement package or for the book that you did, the playbook for dads, what were some trends or some wedding planning processes that you've noticed? And how did, as a sociologist, how did those trends and wedding planning processes look different to you than maybe the average person?
Well, what's interesting about, and so when I wrote the playbook for dads, it was about COVID time, right? And one of the interesting things that emerged is that to a great extent, the wedding industry has always been called recession proof. right? People
Mhm.
will get married, regardless of what's going on in the world. People will get married. That wedding fantasy is too important to let a recession slow it down. But a pandemic will. And so, there was a big dive off the cliff for the wedding industry, which was a shock to a lot of people. It has since rebounded. Some would argue that it's kind of the roaring 20s of weddings. That's what we've had between now and the pandemic, as people coming back big and want to have big and want to have fun. Um, but we are now staring down the face of another economic cliff in this country. And oh, yeah, there's bird flu and flu and everything else is happening. It will be interesting to see whether or not the wedding industry can hang on in the same respect. Um, I have always argued that nobody needs a big wedding. You just don't. The average cost for a wedding is around 30, 35,000, depending on where you are. That's 4 hours of your life for 30 some odd $1,000, which in my mind is like, what? Um, that's mind boggling.
Yeah, that's a
You
whole
go to,
degree in some
yes,
universities. Oh
yes,
my
yes.
gosh.
In other parts of the country, so in Texas, it can be a
Mhm,
little less expensive. But if you
mhm,
go to New York or California, a $70,000 wedding is not an unheard of thing. And that's not the expensive ones. Hmm.
mm,
And so I think as a society, we need to really reframe the conversation from the focus on weddings to the focus on the marriage.
mm,
Because that $30,000 is your house down payment. That's, what else can you do with that money? For many of the students that I've had, the conversation we have in class is, okay, you want this wedding, your parents have paid for your college. Where's their retirement money?
mm,
Should their retirement money go to your wedding? And so having to really think about maybe a smaller event, where it's just the people you really care about the most, your closest family and friends. Um, some of the wedding trends that are out there are very expensive to people in the wedding party. This wedding getaway weekend. I know a woman, her last year, I believe it was, the bridesmaid, she was a bridesmaid for a woman, and their getaway weekend was to Mexico. That's, and the bride's travel agent set up a payment plan over the course of a year,
mm,
for people to be able to pay into and pay off and be able to afford the trip. That's nuts. That's just absolute nuts in
mm,
my mind. If you can afford it, wonderful. If you want other people to do it, and you can afford it, you pay for their trip for them. Don't expect them to go into debt for your event. That's not right. So those are the kind of trends that I tend to keep my eye on. My focus really is on the business of weddings.
mm,
And so the every business that possibly can will affiliate themselves with the wedding industry. There's 100% markup in the wedding industry. If you go to a baker and say, I just like a cake, they'll charge you one thing. You say, I want this beautifully decorated cake, one thing. The moment you say it's a wedding cake, boom, you just sent the cost through the roof, even if they're going to look like the same cake. Mm.
mm,
And so I think it's really important that we, particularly in the times that we're in, that people step back and reassess. Is this really necessary? If you really want to get married, go to the courthouse. You can get married there. I
mhm,
know a woman whose son and daughter-in-law, that's what they did. And they have wonderful pictures. They had somebody who was standing there taking pictures of them and the family, and the
mm,
couple is very happy.
Mhm.
I mean, that's your ultimate goal, is to just have a happy marriage, not fight over a wedding. So yeah,
Mhm.
I'm kind of the pessimistic wedding sociologist.
You are realistic, I think. That's a better word. Yes. So you look at the businesses, but do you have any thoughts on, like, the growing like, the trend of older people, like, you're waiting to get married? Um,
Um,
yeah, does that impact the business of weddings?
Yes, it does, in that generally when
Okay.
people are older, they have more disposable income.
Mhm.
So that does impact it, but they
Mhm.
also need less stuff associated with the wedding industry.
Mhm.
I mean, if you're an older couple, you've already got a toaster. You don't need to put a toaster on the registry.
Mhm. Mhm.
You've already got your life established to a certain extent. That doesn't keep people from creating registries. I mean, is a gift grab. You can, hey, you want the nicer toaster. But I think generally speaking, older couples, they have a better idea of what they want. They have fewer people who are trying to tell them what to do. I mean, if you
Mhm.
have a really young bride whose mother is really vicariously planning her own wedding through her daughter,
Mhm.
and the parents are holding on to the checkbook, it might not be the wedding the daughter really wants. It's, the wedding that mom wanted. But if you have an older bride, it's your money. You also, though, find that older couples, men tend to be more involved
Ooh.
because it's their money also. They're
Mhm.
contributing. They want to know. They want to be part of the planning. That can cause some tension, particularly if it's a first time bride and she had a dream vision, and her fiance's dream vision doesn't look the same. There can be some tension they have to work through. But yeah, you have more control when you're a little older. People are less inclined to tell you what to do,
Mhm.
or you're less inclined to care about what they say. So.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That was interesting that you said that though, because in a way, I feel like um, dads are treated as a checkbook, right? So it's their money. They should know what they're doing, but yet, and with this older couple, you said the gentleman's usually more involved because it's his money involved. So wouldn't you have expected the same for dads to be involved?
Mhm.
You would, except um, sometimes moms are a force in and of themselves, who and dad may choose to just be the checks, to not have to have the argument.
Mhm.
Not to have to deal with, just let them go do.
Mhm.
I don't want to be a part of this argument. And so they may be more inclined to just kind of sit back, and even though that's their money involved. And increasingly, and it's worth mentioning, that weddings are financially family affairs, in that the in-laws are also contributing to the cost of the wedding. So that input may be something that has to be taken into consideration as well. Um, uh, and Increasingly, the couple themselves, even if they're not an older couple, their parents might say, here's what we can contribute. Beyond that, you need to kind of figure it out yourself.
Mhm.
So, mhm, yeah.
Interesting. Wonderful. Kiana, do you have any other questions?
When I was looking at your resume, I saw Martha Stewart, I saw Southwest, I saw Harry Potter. These are big names, you know? So, uh, why, how have all these like experiences in terms of like, these things, how did you get there? How did you balance this education of higher education to why suddenly be a Southwest consultant? Because I felt like the focus is more on the weddings. And when I saw this like sudden shift, I was like, oh, wait, What does that mean? Like, how?
Back to, I think it goes back to the comment that you said earlier, about me tending to downplay stuff, and my comment about being in the right place at the right time. Um, I work hard. I've always been a hard worker, right? I will, and Nora can tell you, so if I say I'm going to get something to you by a certain day, I will do the damnedest I can to get it to you by that time.
Mhm.
Um, Working hard shows other people what you do, but it also opens the door for the luck opportunities. Like I said, I fall into things. So a colleague knew someone at Southwest who knew someone who needed something. And so, hey, are you interested? Sure. Working hard becomes your calling card. People know you say you're going to do what you're going to do, and you will really try to get it done as much as you can. And so these random things that may pop up, I think personally, and I'm one of those woo-woo kind of people, I think it's the universe just opening a door and saying, here, try this. I'm willing to try. Some things are for me, some things aren't for me. But I'm willing to at least give it a try. But putting in the time and the energy and the work, I think, is letting the universe know that, hey, let's give this person a chance. Let's try something. Try something. You got nothing, you have nothing to lose by trying it. If it doesn't work for you, you complete your task and you move on, and to go do something else. But I think you have to show the universe you're willing to try. And by doing your part, I think you're halfway there. Mhm, mhm,
So I guess I have a follow-up question. How do you
mhm,
think, because you researched a lot about marriage and family, right?
mhm.
How was it different from the research when like applying that research as a consultant for Martha Stewart?
Um, hmm. Well, I think when you're researching things, you're getting a broad range of exposure, and when you apply it, you have to distill that down, right? It's a funnel. Research is just this funnel. Everything goes in, and then when you really want to apply it, it just has to be able to fit down. And so what it becomes is a situation where you're choosing what to filter in or filter out, and saying, okay, this is going to apply here. This is not going to apply there. Is this relevant to the questions I'm being asked, or is it not relevant to the question I'm being asked? And so I think that's broadly what you do when you're researching anything. And then when people want a real life application of it, that's where your expertise helps you filter through, and to give them what they are interested in or are looking for. I don't know if that makes any sense. I hope it does. I hope.
Well, I imagine that, imagine if you get a client and you apply non-exist or information that doesn't and shouldn't apply to them, then the client wouldn't be happy. So, wow. I'm also curious, Angela, about Harry Potter and why do you think people like Harry Potter so much? And when you were teaching these sociological courses in Harry Potter, what things did you find interesting from the students who came to the class? Was it more involved because people are like, yeah, I'm a Hufflepuff, don't mess with me, or I'm a Ravenclaw, love, like how?
Interesting thing for me, and I think it applied for so many Harry Potter lovers, is that it creates a world, or it's a world in which you have the potential to have power, right? You have the potential to have power over even the little things. Your glasses broke. Boom, I can do a spell, I can repair my glasses, and I can go about my day. In real life, so many people are feeling powerless. For young kids, when those books first came out, that was power. I could, if I was, a Hufflepuff, I could have power. I could do something. Um, uh, and I wouldn't have to just depend on adults to do. Now, it might have been illegal, I'm an underage witch or wizard or whatever, but I still had the potential. Um, for many people in real life, the older you get, the more you realize the less power you actually have. That your ability to change the wrongs you see in the world is pretty limited. You can, kill them with kindness. You can go out and vote. You can do the basics, but the everyday life experiences, you have a harder time controlling. One of my favorite scenes from Harry Potter, all the Harry Potters, is anything that has to do with the Weasley home. I love the Weasley home. To go in and see that pot stirring on its own and that crochet going on its own. Oh my God. That's the kind of power I would like to have, you know. A spell in my garden is in. I don't have to go actually dig and put in the plants myself. Um,
Mhm.
and I think for many people, that's part of what it was. The magic gave you that sense of power, overcome good versus evil. You have that power. In terms of students, when I first started teaching the class, overwhelmingly it would be students who had read Harry Potter and were into it. They could quote you things. My daughter is a massive Harry Potter fan. She's got a Harry Potter tattoo. She's really into Harry, and she will just have it on in the background. That's her background noise, is Harry Potter's playing. And so that's where my students were. Increasingly over time, though, I've had students who've never read it or seen the movies.
Mhm.
And I'm always curious, is like, why like this class? It's going to be a little harder when you know nothing about it to start off with.
Mhm.
Um, but I think, broadly speaking, it's maybe something that they wanted to do. It just didn't happen. And this is a structured way for them to learn about it. In terms of the work that students do, it's just always fascinating what they do. The analysis of issues of race from the standpoint of the Harry Potter books and movies, looking at the healthcare system, comparing healthcare in the wizarding world versus the muggle world, those kinds of really deep conversations. What are the role of women in the wizarding world? When you think about Hermione and her being, the best of the best, but still not the absolute hero of the story. How does that reflect real life society? Women being the best of the best, but still not the ones making the final decisions. And so those are the kind of conversations we have in that class. And it's a good class when you have had people in it who haven't read Harry Potter because the larger social issues still apply. But it's a fantastic class when you have people who are really Harry Potter nerds, because they can, quote you, page, 400, line 7. And that's off the top of their head, and you're like, uh-huh. Um, but they really know it, and they can help better. I think it helps better understand the world we have when you can dive deep into a fantasy world, because oftentimes diving deep into our own world is a little too painful.
Mhm.
It's too personal. Nobody really wants to talk about their personal painful experiences, but you can talk about the personal painful experiences of Harry Potter, and still get the same outcome at the conversation. So,
I think it's like the sense of belonging. If
mm,
you can find belonging in some place, I am too young for when Harry Potter first came out, but I
mm,
know Divergent, that was kind of
mm,
our generation, and it was like overthrowing the government, but as long as you could have one of the 5 factions,
mm,
like,
mm,
you felt like you belonged somewhere.
mm,
I don't know if there's a, like, recent this kind of decade. But we're only halfway through. So there might be, but yeah, I really like the belonging, and then the thing that you said about diving into a fantasy world makes it easier to look at the problems.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I would agree with what you said about belonging and being which house you're in or what have you,
Mhm.
because I think in so much in contemporary society, people are feeling disconnected. They don't have that sense of belonging. I mean, I've never been a person who joins groups. I'm not a group person. I've never been in the sorority world or anything like that. I'm kind of more of the on the periphery of life, and that probably explains sociology. But I think people do want to be part of a group of some kind, and these stories gave people that sense of connection. You can a complete stranger. You can, run into them in the airport, and you might be holding something, a Harry Potter or something, and they're like, "Oh, what house?" And then you find out you're in the same house, and you're like, "Oh, what? We're above the Ravenclaw." It's that same kind of sense of connection that I think people really need on some level. It's hard to be a society of individuals, and that's a lonely place to be. But I think having a group that you feel connected to is important. Mhm.
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 Wonderful.
I mean, I wish I could have learned your Harry Potter and Sociology course because, well, maybe I was too young when the first movies came out, but I remember being in elementary school with my friends and we all had sticks and we would be like,
Mhm.
I'm Jenny, and someone else would be, I'm Cho Chang. So we would all play with these things, and
Mhm.
it was just amazing to see how maybe Harry Potter isn't real, but how sociology can make it even more real and apply to current standards of life and current events of life. So thank you for doing that for the students, Angela. I think that's a really good opportunity for them to connect.
Well, and like I said, I need to thank them because I learned so much. While you were mentioning it, I don't know why it came to mind. There was a student last time I taught it who did a presentation on the architecture in the wizarding world versus architecture in contemporary society. Oh, it was fascinating. I mean, they went into such a deep dive looking at the architecture, which to a great extent, what you're talking about is old world architecture, whether you're in British architecture, comparing it to our kind of modern square box buildings, and how, framing our understanding of the world from some of this beautiful architecture versus kind of what we got utilitarian architecture. It You just can learn so much, so I think that my experience as an instructor has been one of learning, as much as it has been one of teaching.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for studying with us today.
Oh,
We
of
have
course.
a lot to look back on and review. We hope that you enjoyed this week's podcast and join us for the next podcast episode, where we'll have another study session to discuss social science and reality and everything in between.
Thank
Yay.
y'all.
Thanks.
Thank you, Angela.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.